Welcome to another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wassman here, breaking down day 3 of the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine here in Indianapolis in our Airbnb in Indianapolis. And Dalton, today we got tight ends, we got DBs, both cornerbacks and safeties at the podiums today. And of course, going on literally as we speak is the initial workouts for the 2025 Combine with defensive linemen and linebackers working out today in Lucas Oil Stadium. So I thought it was a really fun day overall at the podium. Some big time players. Obviously, a Heisman Trophy winner was at the podium today. It was really fun to see all those all-American players kind of speak to the media today.
Yeah, I actually just thought of that now. We had tight ends, we had DBs, and, well, we had one wide receiver as well, and he was the one who got all the pub to start it off.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to talk about Travis Hunter, and obviously we're going to talk about a lot of PFF stats here on this show that are available to you guys, every single advanced stat on every prospect in the 2025 NFL Draft, every player in college football, every team in college football, and every player and team in the NFL as well. All available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. You could also get access to our 2025 NFL Mock Draft Simulator with that subscription as well. You mentioned Travis Hunter. He had a mob scene at his podium this morning. Reminded you a lot of last year when Caleb Williams was speaking at the mic. It just makes sense, right? He's the number one player on the PFF Big Board. You and I both agree he's the number one player in this draft. He's one of the most unique prospects in recent memory. So there's actually really interesting answers from Travis Hunter on where he wants to play in the NFL, wide receiver, cornerback, both. I think it was really cool to see the Heisman Trophy winner speak to the media, and he had some interesting things to say.
The overwhelming answer to the question you just asked from him was both.
Yes.
He wants to play both. It was even a question about, well, which one, if you had a gun to your head, which one would you play? And he goes, both.
Yeah.
and so extremely confident in his process and everything he does. Really kind of, you mentioned kind of in isolation with, his recovery, with the physical toll that it takes on his body, with studying film on both sides of the ball. He's so committed to the craft on both sides, right? He wants to be that legendary type of presence who we've never seen do it at the NFL level. We've never seen it done at the FBS level like he did last year. The reason he won the Heisman Trophy is because he was an elite player on both sides of the ball, and he feels like he can do that in the NFL.
I mean, the greatest two-way player in college football history. He won all sorts of awards last year. Won the Heisman Trophy, obviously, as a top player in the country. Won the Chuck Bednarik Award as well as the top defensive player in the country. Won the Biletnikoff Award as the top wide receiver in the country. He's a 2-time Paul Hornung Award winner. Honestly, should be renamed to the Travis Hunter Award because that's given out to the most versatile player in college football as well. Just a special football player. And actually, one of the questions asked of him, Dalton, was, are you a top 10 player in college football history? And Travis, being the ultra-confident player he is, says, yeah, look at my trophy case. And you can see I am a top 10 player. And honestly, the way his career has gone, I think it is as well, man. I keep going back to the fact that we have never seen a two-way player this good before. Like, I know some people say, oh, Champ Bailey or Charles Woodson. Like, Champ Bailey had 500 receiving yards at Georgia. Charles Woodson was used sparingly as a receiver at Michigan. He had 200 receiving yards at Michigan. I know it was a different time back then where they ran the ball a lot more, but Travis Hunter legitimately had 1,400 yards, led the nation in receiving touchdowns, while also being at least a top 2 to 3 corner in the country as well. I think he's the greatest two-way player of all time. He's done it for multiple years at that level too. I personally do think he's a top 10 player of all time.
It's a tough question because when you think about those lists and people argue about them for hours, so they even do it in the NFL with quarterbacks, things like that, right, where it's what you accomplished and the awards you won, and he certainly won plenty of them this year. And when you're talking about maybe is he a top 10 most talented college football player of all time?
Yes.
That's another argument when you think about how special he is on both sides of the ball, and it might be two different things. You said there's some people who go, well, he didn't really win anything. He went 9-4 at Colorado, even in the good season, and things like that. But, I mean, there's no questioning the talent. I think even amongst all these players here, and you even feel it just from his presence and the way he talks, there's talented guys, there's great players, and then some guys are just on a completely different plane of existence, right? Even Deion Sanders was like that back in the day where you're like, that guy could be an all-time great, just a different just a different level that you almost guys that are almost so talented they can't even relate to everybody else, right? It's just on that plane, and he's striving for that greatness. He even said, he goes, look, I'm all ball, man. That's all I'm focused on. So I think, look, it's an argument. I think some people will make it a talent versus accomplishment sort of argument when you think about guys who accomplished a ton. I just, off the top of my head, I think about a guy like a Tim Tebow, right, who some might have in that list, 2 national championships, a Heisman Trophy, everything he did at Florida. It depends how you count it up, but I think he's certainly one of the most talented players we've ever seen.
How I would argue for that as well is that maybe not the national title or even a conference title at Colorado, but they were 1-11 before he got there. Then they went 4-8, which is still an improvement, and then they went 9-4 a year after that, right? And I know Shedeur Sanders and the other guys that got into that program played a big role in that. But at the same time, Travis Hunter was massive in turning around what was easily the worst Power 5 program.
And I think a big thing to talk about in the college sense and how it relates going forward to Deion Sanders as the head coach there. And somebody asked Travis, hey, was Coach Prime, was he the only one who really kind of made that offer of, hey, I'll let you play both ways? And he said, yeah. Coach Prime was the only one. And you wonder, it's one of the great assets when you have Deion Sanders as your head coach, right? It's been talked about a lot. It's the relatability to the players. Obviously, he's one of the all-time greats, but he understands fully how to relate to kids like that, right? And how to relate to athletes and great athletes. And we've seen it when you think about not just Travis Hunter and getting him to go to Jackson State, that famous video now over, when he picked them over Florida State and all that, but you think about getting the number 1 offensive tackle in the country last year in Jordan Seaton, right? Getting so many other talented, Julian Lewis this year, this year, in this high school class. I mean, guys of that caliber don't usually go to Colorado, but they're going there for the sake of playing under Deion Sanders and, allowing those guys to use all of their talents, right? Seaton as a true freshman starting at left tackle at a Big 12 program, right? Hunter getting to be able to do the two-way thing over there at Jackson State and at Colorado. I think when you put your players in position to use their talents and do it freely, I think that's something that's appealing to high school players who are trying to make money both in college and in the NFL eventually.
He was dead set on going to Florida State, which was Deion Sanders' alma mater. But like you said, Florida State told him, hey, you're going to play corner. We're not going to let you play wide receiver. And Deion Sanders, ironically, kind of screwed over his alma mater by saying, listen, kid, we'll let you play whatever you want. If you're going to come to Jackson State, if you're going to be the first 5-star ever to go to an FCS school, we're going to let you you can play kicker if you want for us. That's how special a football player
and
is.
There was another joke thrown in there, too, about somebody asked Travis, hey, would you return kicks? And he's like, no, I have 2 other jobs already.
Yeah, dude, I said it before.
I'm not going to be the first 3-way player.
I tweeted that out. I was like, listen, Travis Hunter is the most overworked man in football probably right now. You don't need to add on more work to his game. So Travis Hunter, just a phenomenal podium and obviously a phenomenal football player, and we'll see what happens in the NFL, man. He's dead set on playing both ways in the NFL, but we'll see where he gets drafted and whether or not they let him do that. And another quote I loved from him in there was saying, I've met with teams before, and teams have told me, listen, kid, like, nobody's ever done this before. And he said, my response to those teams is, well, listen, nobody's ever been like me before. I'm different than everyone else.
He had so many great answers. I mean, he was also asked, well, what impact would you bring to an NFL offense? And he said, I get the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, love that.
I mean, it's just perfect. It just shows you the confidence that goes along with the talent. It's just the right personality you got to have when you're trying to handle everything he's trying to handle right now. I thought he was fantastic.
It's not even just like cockiness; it is confidence, right? Because it's like, how do you go against that? Like, he is legitimately he's right in everything he says.
He's different than the rest of us. That's for sure.
He's the best player in college football. I also love something that's very common among beat reporters nowadays, and they have to. This obviously is a part of their job. If they're covering a team, they want to say, okay, have you met with this team? That way I could write about saying, okay, you met with my team. I could say, oh, they're interested in them. So many of them were asking, hey, have you met with the Raiders? Have you met with the Jaguars and all that? And every time we say, next question, as if like, dude, I'm Travis Hunter.
I want to answer the real ones.
Travis Hunter, everyone wants to meet with Travis Hunter. We don't need to talk about, meeting with them. So I kind of like that too. It sucks for the beat reporters. They just completely, went over the question. But at the same time, it's like, dude, he's Travis Hunter. Of course, every team in the NFL is going to want to talk to that guy, right? So Travis Hunter, a superstar in college football. The Heisman Trophy winner, was a superstar on the podium as well. Unfortunately, will not be working out at the NFL scouting combines. That's really the only highlights we'll get of Travis Hunter this week, but he should be working out at Colorado's Pro Day later on, sometime in March. They have not set a date for that yet, but he and Shedeur Sanders will be doing full workouts at the Pro Day in March, as are a lot of other top prospects in this draft as well. Dawn, I wanted to go over another top corner in this class, and honestly, a guy in Jahdae Barron whose podium normally would be packed with a lot of people, but because Travis Hunter was going at the same time and Will Johnson was going at the same time, not a lot of people were going over there. So I initially, you and I were over at Travis Hunter for a few minutes, and I think you and I just broke away and was like, listen, there are 2 guys that are going to be top 15 picks probably in this draft that have legitimately nobody sitting at their podium. Let's go over there and talk to them. And Jahdae Barron was there, and I thought he was one of the most mature and intellectual players I think we've seen so far at the Combine.
Yeah, I think I loved the part when he was talking about being so process-oriented, and he was talking about having kind of that short-term memory that the great cornerbacks have. Even if you give up a play, you just wipe it away and go to the next one. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it just matches, obviously, the production he had this year at Texas, but to come out and have a presser like that, it was just – it feels more and more like Barron's going to go at least somewhere in the teens, right?
Yeah.
I think there's so many teams that could use him. He was a versatile player, obviously, at Texas this year, and their defense did so much for them and just understands what he's trying to do, right? I mean, it's just he's a player I think that's rising up everybody's boards right now and has a real conversation probably behind Hunter to be the second cornerback taken.
Absolutely, yeah. Listen, Travis Hunter could have almost swept every single award because he won the Bednarik Award, he won the Biletnikoff Award, the Heisman Trophy. He did not win the Jim Thorpe Award. Jahdae Barron won the Jim Thorpe Award, and deservingly so. I thought Jahdae Barron was the best cornerback in college football this past year, and he gave some great answers. And Trevor mentioned on the NFL show one of the great answers he had was saying how you have to have a short-term memory as a cornerback, right? You can't, if you let up a catch, you can't let that affect you in the next play. And I think that was a very mature answer by him, and it's cool seeing him develop over the course of his career. He started out as a safety/nickel hybrid for Texas. They moved him to outside corner, and he was the best outside corner in the country, but he showed, at least in previous years, he could be a very effective player as a safety/nickel hybrid too.
And look, it wasn't just him as the Thorpe Award winner. That was one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the country this season, and I really like the shout-outs for some of his teammates, right? Malik Muhammad, Michael Taft was a guy who was mentioned even by Andrew Makuba as well as somebody who's really the leader, and nobody loves Texas football more than Michael Taft does. And going back another year, and look, if you don't think scouts pay attention not only to the things that Barron says and as far as his own personality, but you've got 2 different players from this Texas secondary talking about Michael Taft, and if you don't think they had that at least somewhere in the back pages of the notebook for next year when you're talking about a high-character guy and a very good player, PFF All-American Michael Taft, I think it's something that's intriguing, and it always, again, works back to connections when you think about, I even heard Jay Higgins earlier in the week talking about Jack Campbell and the mentor he was, and they're going to go through every avenue to find out who these guys are. So I thought it was both for us on the college side, knowing how good Taft is, or a guy like Malik Muhammad in that Texas defense, how good it's going to be again next year. And for those guys, draft prospects, let's say next year, and getting to know who they are and getting to hear some of the other voices in that locker room talk about them was really fascinating.
He said, a lot of great quotes mentioned, nobody loves the Longhorns more than Michael Taft. Michael Taft actually went to Texas, started off as a walk-on at Texas. Did not even receive a scholarship offer from Texas. And Jahdae Barron was saying how Taft brings it, man, all the time, not only in games but in practice. He had a great quote, I thought. He said, when you have to tell a player to chill out in practice, that's how you know he's the real deal, and that's exactly what Michael Taft is. So Michael Taft is one of the best returning safeties in the country. Texas has a loaded defense returning next year, and a big reason why, Dawn, alongside Arch Manning as a new quarterback, we have him as the number 1 team in the country going into next year. Jahdae Barron said one of the reasons why Michael Taft did not enter this year's draft is because he wants to deliver a national title to Austin, Texas. I think the Longhorns, with Taft and the veteran leadership and the young stars they have on that team, they've got as good of a chance as any to win the national title next year.
Elite defenses are great at all 3 levels, and they were one of the few defenses, I think about Ohio State was up there as well, where they had elite performers at all 3 levels of the defense. Now they're losing a few of them, but that's not changing this year. They're the team that I look at going into this year. You got Colin Simmons and those guys up front. You got Anthony Hill at linebacker. You've got Taft and Muhammad and some other young DBs back there in the secondary. We're going to be looking at them again as potentially the best defense in college football with all that talent returning at all of those levels. It's not just one unit.
Absolutely. Trey Moore is back at edge rusher as well. He's a really, really good player. Yeah, Texas's defense is going to be outstanding. Obviously, lose a lot of pieces on the offensive line, but they do recruit really well there as well. And then CJ Baxter coming back at running back. Arch Manning taking over at quarterback, I do think will be an improvement over Quinn Ewers. And some exciting young pieces in that receiver room as well, like a Ryan Wingo, who should really emerge as a star in college football. So I thought that was a really cool moment as well, just seeing Jahdae Barron. And what is his podium at the NFL Combine, where he should be bragging about himself. He took the time out to brag about a lot of his teammates, too, that will be in the 2026 draft and beyond as well, which I thought was really cool. And just showed, again, how mature of a player and how selfless of a player Jahdae Barron is. Finally, Dalton, one that you really wanted to talk about was Elijah Arroyo from Miami. Now, my favorite quote I got of him, because I only got like the last couple minutes of his podium, but someone asked him about Cam McCormick, the 9th-year tight end from Miami, and he goes, "Oh yeah, Unc, that's Unc right there." So Cam McCormick, who is actually older than me, he's a year older than me, was the 2016 high school class. I'm 2017. That was a pretty funny moment. But when you were there, because you were there a lot longer than I was, what really stuck out to you for that?
There was a handful of things. First of all, obviously Arroyo's journey, and it's been a long, winding one to get where he's gotten to, and potentially a top 50 pick in this year's draft, maybe the third or fourth best tight end, depending on whose board you're looking at, and there's a long way to go in evaluating that group. But I think something else that sticks out to me on the college side of it is obviously he's going to get asked about Cam Ward, right, in the 1 year he was there at Miami. And obviously all the talent with Cam Ward sticks out. But he kept mentioning his leadership and the amount that he held his teammates accountable, right? And it was a big thing. And he really, from day one, took the reins of that program. And I do wonder, with all the talent Miami is losing, Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, I think about Arroyo, a guy like Jalen Rivers on the offensive line, right, Damian Martinez. Is Carson Beck, it's going to be a big question, is Carson Beck going to be able to take the reins in the same way that Cam Ward did, that Arroyo was describing? Because that's what he kept bringing up over and over, and he's like, listen, before all the arm talent, before all the X's and O's and offense, and he makes his reads and he makes the throws and all of that, he just goes, Cam Ward came in here and he led and he held guys accountable. And so first of all, that's going to raise Cam's draft stock even more so, and teams are going to love him when they hear that. And I believe he's speaking tomorrow with the rest of the quarterbacks. But I look at that Miami team, and I think about now what we have with Clemson in the ACC. Yep. SMU was in the ACC title game, made the playoff, right? Louisville with Miller Moss over there, and Jeff Brom's running a really good program. Can Miami with
Syracuse?
Syracuse, they lost a decent amount too, but you've got a program in Miami that they missed an opportunity this past year, right? And I think we're going to have maybe a hard time projecting, because you almost think about, well, they got to get better on defense and in some other areas of their team, because can Carson Beck really replicate what Cam Ward did this past year at Miami between the on-field production and even just being the leader that a team like that needs, right? When you're trying to make that next push towards an ACC title, towards the playoffs, right? They just barely missed it this year. Obviously, you mentioned Syracuse. The loss to Syracuse really hurt them in that sense, and they had arguably the best offense in the country from front to back throughout the season. So I think it seems to be a very high standard that Carson Beck is walking into, and he's going to have to live up to after the year that Cam Ward had, and really the hold on the locker room that he had.
I will say I still have Carson Beck as a top 3 quarterback in America going into next year. I believe only behind Kate Klubnik from Clemson, you mentioned him, and then Sam Levitt from Arizona State. I had at number 2. So, yeah, it was a down year for Carson Beck. I don't think it was as bad of a year as people think it was for Carson Beck. There were a lot of interceptions on his tape, but also his receiving corps let him down maybe more than any other receiving corps in the country, maybe outside of Penn State. I think Georgia had the most drops in America last year, right? So Carson Beck still had an 80 PFF grade last year. Wasn't quite as good as the year before. He's still one of the best quarterbacks in America. So I think Miami, honestly, they could have not done any better than what they got in Carson Beck getting there. But you're right, because Cam Ward, I actually interviewed Cam Ward when he was a part of Washington State, and that leadership kind of came across in the interview. I mean, he's a guy who just gets it, man. Like, he wasn't a guy who was a 5-star recruit who had everything handed to him in high school. He was a 0-star. He had to go to Incarnate Word in FCS school, really show out there, then get an offer to play at Washington State, really show out there, then get an offer to play at a much bigger school in Miami, and of course he was the best quarterback in college football this past year. So this is a guy who's done the journey, right? He's not a guy who's going to ask anything of his teammates that he won't personally do himself. That it says a lot about his leadership as well. And Elijah Roy, you mentioned his story. His story is really, really cool as well, and he should be one of the first 3 or 4 tight ends probably taken.
And Arroyo talking about himself and the amount of mental toughness it takes to get through all the adversity he's had, right? And even just the background of playing football in Mexico and then going and playing in high school in Texas, and then all the injuries he had at Miami to get through. And finally, was it in his 5th or 6th year this year, finally had the big year that got him on a draft radar. And I think with Ward, it's the same thing, that mental toughness, right? And I think you had a group of guys that really, they went through a lot together, right? Even like take a Damian Martinez coming from Oregon State, right? And really carrying the load out there and then bringing it to Miami. There was a lot of Xavier Restrepo, I mean, right? He's 5'10" and barely 200 pounds, and he's Miami's all-time leading receiver. So you just think about a bunch of underdog-type guys that come from different backgrounds, and that's what made Miami's season so special this past season. Obviously, they didn't make the playoff, but getting to replicate that on the next team Might be tough, and we're going to find out if they can do it. But Carson Beck should have a chip on his shoulder too now,
He should.
right? After the way things ended at Georgia, and obviously the injury at the end. But he certainly got something to prove because he took a lot of flack last year.
And there were some reports saying that Georgia wanted to move on, right? They wanted to go to Gunnar Stockton, right? So Carson Beck probably says, I'm going to try to prove him wrong and go to Miami and do what Cam Ward did and become, again, like a top 5 pick like many thought Carson Beck could become going into this past year. Didn't obviously do that. He's probably going to try to reestablish himself as a first-round caliber prospect in next year's NFL draft. That unfortunately wraps up all of our NFL Combine coverage here in Indianapolis. We have a lot more coming, though, next week. We have a post-Combine mock draft dropping next week as well once Dalton gets back from Mardi Gras down in New Orleans. But a lot more college football content coming, a lot more NFL draft content coming. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video. For all the producers back there, for Dalton Wassman, I'm Max Chadwick, and we thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.